Hello everyone, and welcome to Biopedia. In our Darwin Day episode for 2024, we went through the first part of Darwin's account of his time on the HMS Beagle. In this episode, we're going to catch up with Darwin as he's making landfall in the Empire of Brazil and continue the story of the Beagle's travels. As you would expect, Darwin was enchanted by the rainforests of Brazil, and this makes sense. A tenth of all species we know about reside in the Amazon rainforest. To give you some more idea of the diversity, it's estimated that the Brazilian Amazon has over 11,000 tree species with a diameter at breast height over 10 centimeters. Moreover, a 2020 study looking at the number of seed plants in the lowland regions of the Amazon returned over 14,000 species. It's therefore easy to see why a naturalist such as Darwin would have been like a child in a toy shop in the Brazilian Amazon. He spent hours strolling around on the 29th of February 1832. However, he found himself in the middle of a storm while trying to come back again. He tried to hide under a tree, thinking that the rain would not reach him. After all, English rain wouldn't have had a hope of getting to him. However, he found the water dribbling down the trunk in a matter of minutes. As a comparison from the website Our World in Data, Brazil gets 1,762 millimeters of rainfall per year in the modern day, while Britain gets 1,220. Darwin spends quite some time talking about the fish species Diodon antennatus, which can blow itself up into a sphere. This is, as you might expect, a pufferfish, and this family is called the Diodontidae. Darwin noticed that, when you interact with one of these fish, it emits a fibre-like red substance from its belly, which acts as a dye. Darwin puzzled about what exactly the use of this might be, and I must confess I haven't been able to find anything in my research so far either. That said, it's possible I missed something. Please let me know at the show's email address if you've got any insights. Regardless, Darwin even mentions that a contact of his told of a specimen having eaten its way out of a shark that had swallowed it. Anyway, the company departed Bahia on the 18th of March, and eventually found their way towards Rio in April. Darwin stayed with an English gentleman who had a property north of Cape Frio. The group travelled on through Campos Novos and Mandatiba, before abandoning the coastline and heading to the rainforest. Darwin noted how pale the tree trunks were and how tall the trees themselves were. While moving through farmland, the company found huge cone-shaped ant nests, which were about 12 feet tall. If you convert this into meters, this comes out to about 3.66 meters tall. I'm not sure which ant species this would be. However, there is an ant species called Camponotus rufipes which lives on the savannah and builds nests which a paper showed me are taller than 30 centimeters. Granted, this height is some way off the description given by Darwin, but this is my first guess for what this ant species might be. During the journey, Darwin was struck by how sturdy the horses were. Apparently, vampire bats had been troubling the party by biting the horses. Bites had then become inflamed due to the saddle exerting pressure on their wounds. Charles Darwin actually saw a bat in the act of draining blood. Darwin's manservant thought he spotted something and actually managed to grab the bat off the horse. Anyway, they arrived at the house of one Manuel Figueiredo on April 13th. Among other things, coffee was being grown in this region of the country, and Manuel's estate was a plantation. The party were feasted and stayed the night, leaving on the 14th. While staying at another manor, Darwin witnessed the proprietor taking the wives and kids of his slaves to sell in Rio de Janeiro. The owner didn't go through with it, but Darwin notes this wasn't because of how terrible it was to remove 30 families from the 30 slaves. He does make the caveat that the owner was better than most, but you can see he's unsettled by being in a country which still practices slavery. Let's diverge a bit to discuss this. Darwin's UK banned the slave trade in 1807, with slavery itself following in 1833. This means that, by 1832, slavery would definitely have been on the wane in the UK, and 1 year away from being prohibited completely. The USA would follow suit because of the Civil War, passing the 13th Amendment to ban the practice in 1864. Brazil and Cuba were the final two countries to practice slavery in the Western Hemisphere. Cuba would get rid of it in 1886, but Brazil would be the very last country with the practice in the West Hemisphere until 1888. Darwin's next main experience with this was when he was trying to communicate with someone who, I think from the context of the story, is a slave. Darwin used gestures with his hands to try and get himself understood, but the slave cowered, thinking he was about to be hit. The sight made Darwin disgusted and shocked by his own admission. The company made their way back after this venture and returned to the same house where they'd been feasted before. While here, Darwin collected insects from the rainforest. After a difficult trek, they made their way to Rio on the 23rd of April, 1832. While they stopped in Rio, Darwin stayed in a cottage in Botafogo Bay, enjoying himself immensely from his description and observing the natural world around him. He collected a lot of insects while in Brazil, and noted there were far more spiders in Brazil than in England. He also noted that there was a high diversity of jumping spiders, a group which we last mentioned in episode 80. The ship eventually sailed out of Rio on the 5th of June, after a stay of over a month in the city. They made their way south, and that is where we will leave them for today. As always, thank you all for listening. Feel free to get in touch at the show's email address for any questions, comments, or topic suggestions for future episodes. Until next time, have a great week, everyone.